We have seen a lot of the basic components of React Native so far. In theory, you can just jump in and start creating your own application, but there are of course a lot more components, advanced components with different APIs. I would like to take a look into two specific components that are going to be very useful as you go down the line and start creating your application. One of them is the flat list component. So far, whenever we had to display a list of items, we have just placed them in the UI and iterated through them. But this doesn't really work it doesn't work when you have a very long list of items, right? Once you start rendering 100, 200, or maybe 1,000 elements, then you cannot render all of them at the same time. Your application's not gonna work. So in order to solve this, React Native provides what's called a flat list. So let's just jump right into the code, and we will go exploring the possibilities of the flat list as we move along. So first I'm going to import it from React Native, and I'm just going to put it inside of the component. So flat list takes a lot of properties. We're just going to create a basic example for now. So one of the required properties is the data, right? This is the array of items the flat list is gonna iterate upon. Another prop that you need to pass is the render item function. So per each element of the array, the render item function is gonna be invoked with that element. So I'm just gonna create a placeholder for now. We're gonna explore it in a little bit. Then we need to pass a key extractor function. This is gonna take the element that will be rendered, and we just need to return a unique key. For now, we'll just use the title. One very useful property is the style that's gonna be applied to the list. And if you have noticed so far, our application doesn't really scale as it grows. We're gonna take care of that now. So we're gonna pass a flex1 property, which means it's gonna expand. It's gonna take as much space as possible without pushing or without messing with other elements. But that also means that we need to also make our container expand to take as much of the view as possible. So that's quite easy to do. We just use flex on both of them. So now that we have that working, now is the time to create our function, our render book function. So this function is gonna be passed an object, and inside of that object is gonna be an item property. And that's gonna be each of the books. Is gonna be a book proper from our array. So we're gonna type this, and let me just see what the name is. So the name of the property we're looking for is list render item info, and we're gonna use our iBook type. So we need to import our iBook type from our stores. I already took care of this in our UI store. I'm exporting the type or the interface that we have created before. So I could in theory just import it. So this is just gonna return that. So now you see the layout has shifted a little bit, but the list is empty because I'm not returning anything yet. So inside of my render book function, I'm just gonna take more or less the same contents that I had before. I'm just gonna return that as the final element. And instead of book, I have my item, but actually I don't need the key anymore because now it's gonna be extracted. It's abstracted away because the flat list is a redirection. And we have that. And there you go. So now you will see the difference is I can actually scroll this. I'm not scrolling the entire interface. I'm just scrolling this part of the UI, right? And in here, now I could have thousands of books, right? This doesn't mean that if each of one of the elements is quite heavy to render, it's going to make it faster. It's just not going to render 1,000 of them at the same time. It's going to render whatever is visible, and maybe a little bit more, down or upward, so that when the user scroll, it still feels smooth. But it's going to improve the performance of our component quite a bit. So that's very useful. That's one of the components you want to use. Sometimes you might want to use just a scroll view, right? If you don't have a dynamic list of elements and you just want the UI completely to scroll, what you want to use is a scroll view, which is, just as the name says, it's just a scroll view. It doesn't have any virtualization, but it allows your all the stuff that you put in there is gonna now be scrollable. Great. Now, let's just take a look at another component, which is a different type of component. This is a dependency. So we're gonna add React Native Web View. This is a native package. It has a native component. So we're gonna do a pod install. And we're gonna rebuild our application. Great. So now that we have that working, let me just to be sure, I'll just close it and start it again. So now that we have a web view component, what we can do is we can just use it inside of our component. So I'm gonna go to my book container and I'm gonna import web view from React Native Web View. And now, to make our application a little bit more interesting, instead of just displaying the title of the book that was passed into the component, I'm actually gonna mount an embedded web view. Now the web view takes a source object, and within the source object I need a URI. So I'm gonna do a Google search, just to display something interesting to the user, right? If somebody's taking a look into our favorite books, or maybe me myself, and I want to get some news or whatever, I can just do a Google search, right? So I'm just gonna save that, and now let's see what happens if I wait. I made a mistake. This is supposed to go like this. Great. So now if I go into Lord of the Rings, yeah, right. I need to accept the Google terms and conditions, but doesn't matter. There it is, right? So the web view component is fairly easy, right? It just mounts a small web view inside of your application. But like this, there are many components which also have a UI element. There are camera components, there are SVG components, there are more image mounting components, and so on and so forth. So you can just search for packages and import them, and if they have a UI part, you can just display them within your application. One important thing to know here is that not all of them support macOS at the time. All of them support iOS and Android. So you might have to check if the specific component you're looking for actually can run on macOS machines. But I think that's it for the basic part of our JavaScript